So today is how to pay for long-term care. All right. And as I was just sharing, if you missed the first couple of minutes there, the intent behind these Wednesday webinars, or webinars of the week as we're calling them, is really to share concise elder care information about aging, about trusts and asset protection and care itself during a 30 to 40-minute window once a week. Put the information out there, answer some questions, and really help people, because I've been doing this for 22 years, and there's always a need for information when folks are really dealing with these issues. What we have found is there's information you can take in before you ever need the care or the planning, but then when it starts to really happen, that's when you need to hear it all again and start to implement it. All right. If you've missed any of our prior webinars, they're on the website, tullyelderlaw.com. And under the video link in the navigation bar, you can click on webinars and they'll be there. They're on the Facebook page as well, Tully Law PC on Facebook. And let's get started, okay? So bottom line is, we're talking about how to pay for long-term care. And as we age, there are two types of unfortunate crises that can occur. One that you really have no control over, and one that you do have some control over, okay? The first crisis that can hit us as we're getting older is our health. And quite honestly, we really can't control that type of a crisis. We can't control what happens, and we can't control necessarily how it impacts us and how we respond to it medically. A health issue can be gradual, it can have a sudden onset, but it can certainly develop into a crisis. And if it does, then you have to seek out the experts and the medical team and work on recovering. On the other hand, there is a crisis that you pretty much can control, and that's the topic of today's webinar. You can take steps to avoid a long-term care financial crisis, okay? And according to the United States Department of Health and Human Services, nearly 70%, 70% of us that are turning 65 this year will need some form of long-term care. That's an astounding number. So we have to face it. We're going to need the care, or our loved ones are going to need the care. But there's two questions. How do we pay for it? And will we let it ruin us financially? That's what it comes down to. And that's something we can figure out before it all happens. All right, so let's get started with the presentation here. All right, so I'm just sharing my screen now, going back to this. Okay, so let me get moving here. So we're going to start off with a couple of questions, okay? My screen is shared. Yes, you can see that now that I've changed it. You should be, give me a thumbs up or one of the comments, please, to let me know, because I've done it before where I've forgotten to share the screen again. So I just want to make sure you can see it. Yes? Let me see. Somebody tell me yes. You can't see the screen now. Can you see it now? Susan, can you see it now? Okay, good. I'm getting some yeses. All right, great. Thanks, guys. Okay. All right, good. Now, so the first thing we're going to ask is, well, what exactly is long-term care? Okay. And what it is it's services and supports to help people meet their personal care needs, period. Help people meet their personal care needs, okay? And that's usually defined by dealing with the activities of daily living, okay? So what are those activities of daily living? Well, the activities of daily living are what we basically do every morning when we get out of bed, all right? It's walking, it's bathing, it's toileting, it's dressing, it's eating, and it's transferring, all right? Moving from a chair or moving from a bed, being able to do that. These activities of daily living are the functional limitations or the functional tasks that we actually undertake each and every day. So these activities are how we define what long-term care is. When we need assistance with these activities of daily living, that's when we actually are going to need some type of long-term care support and services. Don't confuse this with what's called the incidental activities of daily living, like housekeeping and paying bills, shopping for food, preparing the food itself, and taking your medications. Those are incidental ADLs. These are the main ADLs which all of long-term care is based on. Some companies and governments they'll add one or two different ones, but it's generally these six. Next question is, where do we actually receive long-term care? All right. We can receive it at home, and that would include a child's home or a sibling's home. It would include an apartment, okay, a senior housing. That's our home, and that's where we can receive long-term care services. We can also receive long-term care services in an assisted living facility. There's also ones out there called independent living facilities, but it's these assisted living facilities that you see on every corner, the Sunrise, the Atria, the Bristols, and so forth. They are there to provide a communal environment, fantastic as far as the social interactions, but they don't provide care one-on-one. That's something in long-term care one-on-one. You'd have to get that separately while in the facility. And then we have skilled nursing facilities. Of course, those are the nursing homes. That's where long-term care also occurs. Lastly, we won't talk about it much today because they're pretty unique. You have what's called a continuing care facility or a continuing care retirement facility. There's a couple of them on Long Island. Again, very unique, but it's meant to be one campus from independent living to assisted living to memory care and even skilled nursing care, all on one campus, a whole different pay structure. Perhaps another topic for another day. Another question, why is paying for long-term care such an issue? Well, the bottom line is this, it's awfully expensive, okay? Long-term care is ridiculously expensive. So let's look at the actual costs. So we'll go through each one except the last one. Home care can be anywhere from $22 to $30 an hour with a home care agency. An agency is 99% of the time what's recommended. With an agency, you're going to have insurance, you're going to have substitutes, you're going to have background checks, you can have training. Some families provide care on their own for some time for a loved one. Some families will opt for help from a church or a synagogue, or they'll pay cash to a lady down the block to help out. All of those things occur. But bottom line is, as needs progress in the world of long-term care, you're best off with a home care agency, and that's what they're going to charge hourly. All right. So let's look at what that becomes on the basis of a day. All right. It jumps up to $280, up to almost $400 a day for 24/7 hour care. And it could be more if you're looking at what's called split shift, where you have an aide literally in the house for 12 hours a week. They leave, another one comes in for 12 hours, and they stay awake as well. Okay. Monthly, as you could imagine, it just keeps growing. Monthly home care, $8,000 to almost $12,000 a month. It gets very expensive. Looking at this for the entire year, if a family's paying for home care personally, privately, it could be anywhere from $100,000 way up to close to $140,000, $150,000 a year. We see families doing this all the time. And the problem is it starts to run out, as you can imagine. Okay, so home care, you start out paying for it privately because the needs are minimal. But as they start to increase, the costs become exorbitant. Now, assisted living, a different structure. You're going there to pay for, and paying for room and board. So monthly, you're looking at about $5,000 to $9,000 a month just for the room and board. If you need the dementia unit or like the memory support unit, that might even be a little bit more. Annually, assisted living care can be upwards of $60,000 to over $100,000 a year. And guess what? That doesn't include the care. So you'd have to pay those home care costs that we just spoke about on the slide before, even in an assisted living, if you want that one-on-one care and support. Again, assisted livings can offer congregate care. They can have an aide covering a group of residents. But if you need the specific ADL support, assisted livings will add on different care packages where they'll come in and do different assistance with different tasks per person, or you can opt for an actual aide to come in and assist you, just like if you were at home. Now, in a skilled nursing facility, and this is nursing homes, Unfortunately, it just keeps getting more and more expensive. You're looking at about $475 to about $650 a day. Okay, that's for a nursing home. Bottom line, we tell clients every single day of the week it's $14,000 to $20,000 a month if you or your mom or your dad or your spouse needs nursing home care. All right. And as you can imagine, on an annual number, you're talking about 170 to over $240,000 a year to pay for a nursing home out of pocket. It's ridiculous. It's too expensive, but it is one of the ways to pay for long-term care. And some families choose to use cash to pay for care, either because they have a lot of it or they don't know that there's other options. Okay. So that's one of the main reasons that I'm doing this presentation today, is to share there's other options. You don't have to use all of your cash. Okay. Now, what we're talking about is families will sometimes say, well, wait a minute, I have Medicare. Doesn't Medicare cover these costs? And the reality is that we are unfortunately in a divided healthcare system as we get older. Bottom line is Medicare does not cover long-term care costs. They will cover what's called intermittent care after a discharge from a hospital or a rehab, but that's a couple of weeks. That's not long-term care. That's to help you get back on your feet after you broke your leg. Okay, that's not long-term care. So when it comes to paying for long-term care, again, cash is possible. Medicare is not something you can rely upon. So let me share the divided system that seniors face. What we have is a medical need, perhaps as we're getting older. So, for example, yourself or your family members, if you're suffering an issue that's medical in nature, perhaps doctors or hospitals or a rehabilitation facility is needed for physical therapy. That's all medical in nature. Okay, doctors and hospitals and ERs and so forth. Because it's medical, Medicare is paying for that. Okay, medical, Medicare, as well as your Medicare supplemental insurance. Hopefully you have that. Okay, some families have what's called a Medicare Advantage plan. Same thing, only covers medical needs. On the other side of the coin, however, if you are suffering and enduring a chronic issue or a custodial issue or what we call long-term care, it's all the same thing. Chronic, custodial, long-term care all refers to the same thing. If you're dealing with those types of issues, that's the activities of daily living I was just talking about. Okay. So if you need assistance with an activity of daily living, walking and bathing, for example, due to balance issues, that's not medical. So Medicare isn't paying for it. What you're dealing with is long-term care. So again, you're using cash or the other methods I'm going to talk about right now to actually pay for that type of care. Okay. Bottom line, custodial or long-term care is dealing with not Medicare benefits at all. Okay. So how do we pay for long-term care? Well, there's three different ways to pay for long-term care. What you have is cash, certainly. You have what's called long-term care insurance. And ultimately, you have what's called the Medicaid program. All right. So those are the three ways to address long-term care needs as we're getting older: cash, long-term care insurance, and the Medicaid program. So let's talk about each. On the cash side, as we just discussed, how expensive is paying for care out of pocket? Home care needs can be upwards of $100,000 a year. Assisted living can be upwards of $100,000 a year plus the care, okay? And then an actual nursing home, way over $200,000, up to $250,000. Again, there are some families that have sufficient assets to pay for that. Most families do not. So using cash is not really the way to go when you're dealing with a long-term care issue. Now, if you don't plan in advance and deal with this in advance, then this is the crisis you can get hit with that I was talking about in the introduction. If you're hit with these costs because you've done no planning and no protection, and you don't have perhaps the appropriate insurance, then it's a financial crisis. Okay, so we want to avoid using cash to pay for care if possible. It can devastate the family financially. The second way to pay for long-term care insurance, to pay for long-term care, is with long-term care insurance. Okay, Long-term care insurance is a type of health insurance, and it would have to be a robust policy. And I'll talk about the different variables, but it's where the policy will reimburse the policyholder a daily amount for services that's assisting them with the activities of daily living. Okay. In order for long-term care insurance to kick in and to go through the claims process, generally you have to prove to the insurance company you need help with either two or three of the activities of daily living. And the claims process is a whole nother story. It can be a whole race to actually get them to pay, but ultimately they usually do. There are a range of options when it comes to long-term care insurance, and because of all the different variables, it's why it's a difficult purchase. Okay, one that can be very beneficial. All right, if you can qualify for the care and if you can actually afford the premiums. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the variables that help us determine if it's a good policy or not. So, the first variable is what's called a daily benefit. When somebody is purchasing long term care insurance, they have to look at the daily costs of what the care may be. And that's what we just covered earlier. How much does home care cost, assisted living care, and nursing home? So, a person is purchasing a certain level of payment that will cover that level of care. So, if I were to buy $100 a day of home care, that's all I'll get. If I'm paying $200 a day for home care, that means I got to pay the difference on my own. Okay. And the same thing with assisted living and nursing home. Another variable is the term of years. So you can purchase a long term care policy for 2 years of coverage, 4 years, 5 years, lifetime, even. Okay. Obviously, the more years of coverage, the better the policy and the more expensive it's going to be. The more daily benefit coverage you have, the better the policy, but the more expensive it's going to be. Then you have location, which really means what type of a policy are you purchasing? Is it for home care only? Is it for nursing home only? Usually, assisted living falls into the home care side of it, but home care, assisted living, and nursing home, having all that coverage, guess what? Makes it a better policy, but makes it more expensive. Then you have what's called the elimination period. The elimination period is kind of like your deductible. It's how long you'll pay for the care before the policy kicks in. Typically, it's 100 days. It could be 90, or it could be any number of lower. The lower amount of an elimination period, the better the policy, and obviously the more expensive it is. And finally, there's what's called an inflation rider, probably one of the most important factors there is, because what you're looking at here is if a couple buys long-term care insurance at 60 years of age, then they may not need the care for 20 years. And if you buy $200 a day of coverage and don't use it for 20 years, the costs of long-term care are exponentially growing every year. And if your insurance benefit isn't also growing, then you're going to have a great shortfall in the future. Okay. So having an inflation rider is crucial. There's a simple inflation rider with simple mathematics there so that it goes up by that percentage every year. And then you have compound inflation protection, where it will just keep growing based on that new amount each and every year, where you'll see the most growth over time. Okay. Again, having it is important. Compound inflation rider is the better way to go. Good policy, but it's going to be much more expensive. Okay. Next, I want to talk about the New York State Partnership a little bit. So, New York State Partnership is a form of long term care insurance. It's a unique partnership between the state of New York and the private insurance company, okay? With, of course, the consumer being there looking at it saying, I want the private insurance, but I want to partner with you, New York State, so that after my insurance benefits are utilized, then Medicaid, or what's called Medicaid extended coverage, will kick in to pay for the long-term care afterward. Okay. There are two types of partnership policies, what's called the total asset and the dollar for dollar policy. Total asset policy means all of your assets will be protected as you use up your benefit and then transfer into the Medicaid program. A dollar for dollar long term care insurance policy is where you purchase a certain amount of coverage, and therefore that amount of assets equally will be protected from Medicaid later on. All right. So those are the two types of policies. In order for a partnership policy to be accepted into New York State, and by the way, There were certain brokers that are New York State Partnership certified and some that aren't. So you would need to find somebody that is New York State Partnership certified. And all New York State Partnership policies have a little icon logo on the policy pages. It says New York State Partnership on it. So that's how you know you've purchased that type of a policy. In order for it to be a valid partnership policy, there are certain minimums. So, for example, you have to buy at least $337 of nursing home daily benefit, and you have to purchase at least $168 a day for home care benefits. In addition, there has to be at least a 3.5% compound inflation rider. So if you're looking at partnership, those are the minimums that have to be built in. Okay. The partnerships can be 2 years long, 3 years long, or even a 4-year plan. Okay. And again, once you go through you utilize 2, 3, 4 years of coverage, then you jump into that Medicaid extended coverage. All right. The total asset policy is then exempt from look back periods as well as penalties, because all of your assets are going to be protected. They don't care what you've done with your assets as far as protection and transfers and so forth. The dollar for dollar policy, however, it has the look back period, and your assets are only protected again up until the amount of coverage you purchased. So therefore, they don't care about gifts and transfers of money up to that dollar figure either. So if you bought $250,000 worth of coverage and you gave a child $200,000, which I don't recommend you do, the irrevocable trust, of course, is the better way to go. But for the example, if you gave the $200,000 to your child, that amount won't be penalized, okay, in a nursing home scenario under the current law, because you have that $250,000 of dollar for dollar coverage, okay? Long-term care insurance, again, a good thing to have if you can afford it and if you can qualify for it. The partnership policies, same exact. Very important thing to think about with a partnership policy. Your assets are protected, but your income is not. All right. So if you are a retired teacher or firefighter or have any other significant pension, that is still exposed and subject to the Medicaid rules. Okay. So you have to put that into consideration and talk to somebody that specializes in long-term care insurance. Okay. Now, the third, oh, forgive me, hybrid policies. Let's talk about that for a moment. A hybrid policy has become very popular recently. What was happening is for years is consumers weren't purchasing long-term care insurance that frequently. All right. One of the main objections to it from my perspective was, well, I'm going to pay the insurance company, $4,000 a year for this premium. I'm going to do that for 20 years. I'm going to be giving them, $80,000 of my money, and then I might just pass away and never need the long-term care coverage. So they felt that that was a waste of money and not a risk they wanted to take. So there's other riders, such as a return of premium rider, but there's also now what's called hybrid policies. So you can actually link up your long-term care coverage with a life insurance policy. That way, the money's coming back one way or the other. Okay, so a hybrid policy is certainly something to examine if you're going to go down this insurance road. I tell folks 40s, 50s, maybe early 60s, they should be looking at long-term care insurance. Again, expensive, and you have your health requirements. If we don't want our cash to be used, and if we don't get the long-term care insurance, then what we're looking at is Medicaid. So Medicaid is the third way to pay for long-term care, and it is 100% the payer of long-term care for the middle class in New York, all right, especially on Long Island. I did a webinar recently on all of the Medicaid benefits. I'll talk a little bit about it today, but not get into the depth. Go to, again, the website under the video link, and you'll see our prior webinars, and you can catch more details about the Medicaid program itself, all right? But to give you that introduction, Medicaid is all about three things, okay? It's all about your assets, it's all about your income, and it's all about your health, okay? Now, on the asset side of things, that's where asset protection and irrevocable trusts come into play. Just last Wednesday, I did a whole 45, 50-minute webinar on the importance and need for irrevocable trusts. So again, check that out on the webinar because I get into all the details about the trusts. But that's the tool we use to protect assets from Medicaid eligibility, okay? And through using irrevocable trusts and planning in advance, that's how you're able to avoid the financial crisis down the road, all right? By planning and protecting for this exact thing, all right? Now, we do it through what's called an elder care protection plan. So we come alongside the family and we will work on protecting assets and preparing for care down the road. So, crucial step to take, generally 65 years of age and older, definitely 70 and above. That's when you're looking at undertaking the asset protection for Medicaid eligibility down the road. On the income side, there's also income thresholds. So you have an asset threshold for Medicaid and you have an income threshold. There's different ways to protect it for home care. We can't protect it for nursing home care. But again, it all goes into the plan to see what we can do to protect. Finally, health. There are certain health or long-term care needs that must be met in order for community Medicaid or nursing home Medicaid to come into play. So let me talk about that. There are two Medicaid programs, which I'll talk about on the next slide. Both of them there's a threshold that you have to meet a certain level of care, what's called obviously long-term care. Long-term care in the Medicaid context is, of course, all about the activities of daily living, but it also must mean that meet a time frame. So under current New York law, community Medicaid has an assessment on your health to determine if your care needs are long-term in nature, meaning at least 120 days. So it has to be at least 4 months worth of care in order for Medicaid to come in on the long-term care side, okay? So there are two Medicaid programs, as I just mentioned, community Medicaid and what's called chronic care Medicaid. Chronic care Medicaid is nursing home, so home care and nursing home care. Community Medicaid is where they'll send an aide into the house. That's your home health care. Community Medicaid will also participate in what's called the assisted living program. That's where Medicaid will actually pay for your assisted living, room and board, and that congregate level of care. Not every assisted living participates in this ALP program. There's only about a half dozen of them on Long Island. They're allowing for more and more beds to be ALP beds, but again, it's not as common as it should be, and there's usually wait lists to get into an ALP bed within an assisted living. But community Medicaid will in fact pay for it. Community Medicaid also includes adult daycare. All right. Now, eligibility for community Medicaid right now is as good as it's ever going to be. So right now, under community Medicaid eligibility, there is no look-back period, which means you can actually transfer all of your assets in May and be eligible on June 1st, all right? There's no look-back period and there's no penalties for community Medicaid as of now. In the next slide, I'll change all that for you, unfortunately. We do have care assessments, as I was just sharing on the health side. So community Medicaid, an aide can come in the house, an aide can go within an assisted living, assuming they allow that. No look back period, no penalties, all right? But they are overseeing or assessing to make sure the care needs are met. On the nursing home side, all right, you do have what's called a 5-year look back, and you have transfer penalties. So that's where the crisis can come in as well. If somebody needs a nursing home and they've done no asset protection thus far, and it's a single individual, then you're going to be dealt with the 5-year look back and penalties as you try to protect your assets. And you'll be paying for the care for a long time on your own, okay, depending on the amount of assets that you have and what you're trying to protect. That's the concept of the look back and the transfer penalties for nursing home eligibility, okay? Now, community Medicaid, as I've said, as of right now, no look back period, no penalties. Unfortunately, that's all changing, all right? So what's happening October 1st for community Medicaid is it's going to be similar to nursing home Medicaid. We're going to have, though, gratefully, a shorter look back period. So it won't be the 5 years or 60 months for nursing home. It will only be 2.5 years or 30 months for community Medicaid. And during that look back period, what are they doing? They're looking to see what asset protection steps you've taken. Again, I cover a lot of this in that prior webinar, but the asset protection steps like giving money to the kids or setting up an irrevocable trust, that's what they're looking for. And that's what a good law firm should be looking at before they ever, submit the application. So they're doing that to find out if gifts were made and transfers were made so that they can penalize you. And what that means is it's a math calculation. For about every $13,000 that you give away, Medicaid will not pay currently for the nursing home for 1 month. You give away $130,000 in a nursing home scenario, in the 5-year look back, Medicaid won't pay $130,000 divided by $13,000. They won't pay for 10 months worth of nursing home care. That's coming to community Medicaid. We haven't had that before. So the bottom line here is that bottom line is this: protect your assets as soon as possible, because we now have that look back coming for community Medicaid. When we didn't have a look back for community Medicaid, you can transfer your assets, you can set up your trust the month before and access the program. We no longer have that luxury. So get your asset protection started to get the 30-month and the 60-month look back rolling, okay? So you don't have to deal with the penalties. In addition, starting October 1, there's going to be higher care needs, okay? All the more reason that you need advocates on staff to help you at your side to deal with the advocacy, the intervention, the coordination of the care. Again, you may have heard in prior webinars, we offer a service that's called life care planning. It's where the experienced elder attorneys and our geriatric social worker and our board certified patient advocate all come together to help the family through the legal and the financial and the care needs of aging, okay? So these higher care needs that you're going to be faced with are certainly out there, but with the right advocacy and, of course, the right needs, you'll be able to get the care even down the road, all right? So what this is all about is, as I've just tried to stress, is it's all about timing. It's all about trying to get the plan and the protection in place so that you have the ability to access Medicaid down the road to pay for your care, all right? Once somebody hits 65 years of age, you have to start shifting your thinking. You have to start focusing on, how do I pay for long-term care, all right? Bottom line is, cash can devastate a family financially. Long-term care insurance, if you have it, that's great. I would love to see the policy once you become a client so that we can determine whether it is sufficient, whether it is robust enough, okay? A lot of the long-term care insurance policies that we see are, $200 a day for nursing home care. That doesn't cover it. That individual still has to do the asset protection for Medicaid work, even though they have the long-term care insurance, okay? So again, you can use cash. It's just not the smartest idea. It's not the best idea. It's not the best plan. If you have the long-term care insurance, make sure it is sufficient as far as the daily coverage and the term of years. If you qualify for it and if you can pay for it, perhaps look into it for yourself now at this point, all right? And then the third and final way to pay for your long-term care is through the Medicaid program. Again, that becomes the default program for the vast amount of middle class, all right, New Yorkers and Long Islanders as they deal with these long-term care needs. But in order to gain eligibility with that, the best thing to do is to plan and protect your assets in advance, okay? That's how you avoid a financial crisis. That's how you can actually pay for your long-term care, all right? I did better on time today. I'll do even better next week, I promise. So again, thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, I'll check them out now and try to answer them. Check out the past webinars on the website. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. We're out there doing what we can to share information and advertise for these events as well, okay? So let me see if we have any questions. I'll answer them. If you have questions after today, please feel free to shoot me an email, brian@tullyelderlaw.com. For those on the phone, it's Brian, BRIAN, @Tully, TULLY, elderlaw.com. Once I spelled com for somebody and they looked at me going, I think I know how to spell com.com. So I don't spell that anymore. Then our phone number, 631 424 2800, 631 424 2800. Okay. Let me pull away here from the screen itself, and I'll start looking at some questions here. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Okay. Hello again, everybody. Full size Brian. Okay. So what we're looking at is some questions here. With the New York State Partnership, once Medicaid kicks in, does the quality of your care change? Absolutely not. I'm glad you asked that question because it's important. I've had clients at some of the nicest, quote, nicest, best rated long-term care facilities on the island. And my client at that point in time was actually paying privately for the care. And what was happening is it was $18,000 a year. However, I knew a client on that same floor that was also receiving Medicaid. So the bottom line is, whether you're on Medicaid or paying privately or using long-term care insurance, it is the same providers, it's the same facilities, it's the same home care agencies. Okay, very informative. Thank you. You're very welcome, Sandy. You're welcome, Vicki. Thank you. Will whole life insurance mess you up on the Medicaid spend down? It can. It can. That's a good question. So when somebody's looking at Medicaid eligibility, there's a total amount of $15,750 that a person can have in their name. We always like our clients to have less, all right? What goes into that $15,000 calculation is investments, cash in the bank, as well as cash value of life insurance. So the death benefit doesn't matter, but the cash value does. If you have a revocable trust, do you need a long-term care policy? Good question. Covered this in a couple webinars ago. A revocable trust, unfortunately, does absolutely nothing for asset protection whatsoever. A revocable trust has one main purpose, and that's to avoid probate. So if you have a revocable trust, you need to either get a robust long-term care insurance policy, or depending on your age, you start an elder care protection plan, which is about the asset protection and the irrevocable trust. Okay, so that's a yes. Are we still meeting with clients? The answer, Sandy, is absolutely yes. So what we've been doing for the last 2 months, thank God, is a tremendous amount of Zoom calls. It's when I've started doing these webinars back in early April. And Zoom is where we're able to see mom and dad, the children, all on the screen here. It's actually pretty interactive. I had a Zoom call with a 77-year-old wife last week. And at the end of it, she said, you know what? I actually felt pretty comfortable with you. I wasn't expecting the video to actually offer that level of comfort, but it did. So yes, we're doing Zoom calls and FaceTime calls for consultations. When it comes to actually signing documents, we're doing that gloves and masks out in the parking lot. All right. We review all the documents in advance. You come in, the documents are on the table. You're wearing your mask and gloves. You're bringing your pen if you want, and you're signing the papers. All right. Once you understand them all the day before, they're there just for signature. If you can't come to us, we'll go on your front lawn. We've been putting out the folding table in people's driveways. All right. This stuff needs to get done, and timing is crucial. So we're not waiting for this to be over to help families. Does the 30-month look back start transactions after October 30? Okay, so the look back period for community Medicaid and the penalties and the higher care needs all start October 1st. The goal for all of our clients right now, and perhaps for some of you, is to get the Medicaid application completed. And well, first of all, get the eligibility completed, get the Medicaid application completed and filed before October 1st. The problem we're going to run into with Medicaid applications at this point is that Medicaid agencies haven't been working for the last 2 months at full steam. All right, as you can imagine, most organizations are not. So there's a backup of older applications. You have all the people that have been trying to file for the last 2 months. There's a backup with them. And now you're going to have a backlog for people trying to get in before October 1st. The bottom line is, if you are in need of Medicaid services, call now and get it moving as soon as possible. Okay. If a client has a few $1,000,000, can they still do an irrevocable trust and then go on Medicaid for the long-term care? Well, it all depends, all right? Medicaid is there to pay for those that are financially eligible. So whether a client has $100,000 or $1 million, that is possibly worth protecting and gaining Medicaid eligibility down the road. So it all depends on the factual circumstance that the family is dealing with. There's no written rule on this, but I think if a family does have more money, that there is certainly more risks associated with the Medicaid application. Okay. Um, oh, thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. Does every state have their own Medicaid programs? The answer is yes. So Medicaid itself is a federal program created back in the 60s. It is the sister program to Medicare. Again, Medicare is your medical needs. Medicaid is your obviously your poverty programs, but it's also in our world your long-term care programs to pay for the chronic care and the custodial care. So federal government created it. Each state really manages it and implements it. Each state has their own rules, their own regulations, their own waiver programs, and then each county is also obviously involved because they're processing it. Okay. Is New York State Partnership a long-term care plan portable if I move to Florida? Great question. Usually it is. There are reciprocal states. So if you're moving, I would certainly talk to your long-term care insurance salesperson and make sure the state you're moving to is reciprocal. Okay. It used to be that you can move to another state for your long-term care benefit, but then if you needed Medicaid, you'd have to come back to New York. Some of that's been worked out over the last couple of years. I've heard from a friend that assisted living is a little cheaper in PA. New York is, surprise, the most expensive with a lot of things. Real estate, everything you can imagine, assisted livings, nursing homes. Other states are less expensive. You cannot, though, however, go state to state with Medicaid. If you apply in New York, that's the Medicaid program you have, and you're going to need to reapply if you move to another state. All right. Income in regard to Medicaid. Okay, so Medicaid, as I said, assets, income, and care. All right. On the income side, for home care, a person is allowed to have $895 of income to do anything they want with it. All right. If they have more than $895, it gets more complicated, but we can certainly protect it. So we would utilize something called a pooled supplemental needs trust. And again, I've spoken about that in prior webinars. If we have a consultation, we talk about it even more. But a pooled supplemental needs trust is a fantastic tool where we can shelter what's called the income overage so that we can keep our 895, but also keep all the income over that amount to help pay the bills to keep mom, dad, or the client in the house. All right. There are some important innuendos with that and rules that have to be followed. But again, the pooled trust allows you to shelter your income. All right. Any other questions? I think we are good. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you coming on board. Watch your emails for next week's topic. All right. And please register and come on board. Share these. All right. Tell your friends. Send them forward the email. All right. Or like us on Facebook and let your friends know about it. Okay. Thank you very much. If there's any topics you'd like to hear us talk about, please shoot me an email and we'll try to incorporate that into the schedule. All right. Again, thank you very much and we'll see you around.